It's the year 324 AD, and the Roman Empire is co-ruled by the emperors Constantine and Licinius, the former based in the west and the latter in the east. On the 18th of September, Constantine and Licinius go head-to-head at the Battle of Chrysopolis, and Constantine comes out victorious, becoming the sole ruler of the great Roman Empire. He makes a pivotal decision to establish a new capital, Constantinople, named in his honor, and it became the center of what modern historians would later call the Byzantine Empire. But this city wasn't built on new land. It was built on the site of an already existing city we know as Byzantium. Constantine picks this site in 324 AD, and on the 11th of May 330, his new Rome is ready for inauguration. But how did Byzantium go from being just a minor city within the Roman Empire to becoming Constantinople, a bustling metropolis that maintained its capital status for over 1,000 years? I'm Madam Archaeologist, your go-to informant on everything archaeology, and in this episode, I'll explore how Constantine transformed the urban landscape of Byzantium, turning it into Constantinople. Let's take a quick look at what we know about Byzantium before Constantine. It was founded as a colony of the Greek city-state of Megara in the 7th century BC, and its name comes from the colony's legendary founder, Byzas. The Greeks actually called it Byzantion. Byzantium is its Latinized form. After switching hands a few times, the city was eventually incorporated into the greater Roman world. It was very classical in design, having an acropolis, an agora, and a theater, and of course temples. It even had walls to protect the colony. This is a reconstruction, but take it with a grain of salt because our archaeological knowledge of pre-Constantinian Byzantium isn't that great. Byzantium wasn't a major city-state, but it thrived as a trading city. It suffered a bad blow in the late 2nd century AD after its citizens backed the wrong side in the war between Septimius Severus and Pescennius Niger of Syria over who would become ruler following the Emperor Commodus' assassination. Septimius Severus won, and he had Byzantium destroyed as punishment. But he later rebuilt it, adding a bathhouse and a hippodrome. The latter was where horse and chariot racing would take place. In the 3rd century AD, Byzantium's urban landscape was a blend of classical Greek and Roman architectural styles. Unfortunately, we don't have too much archaeological material from this period, so there's a lot we don't know about pre-Constantinian Byzantium. But what we do know is that in the 4th century, in comes Constantine, and he gives the place a revamp. Why was Byzantium picked as the site of Constantine's new capital, his Nova Roma, or New Rome? An important point to mention, and you've probably already heard this if you're watching this video because you're a Byzantine enthusiast, is its strategic geographical position. Located at the mouth of the Bosphorus, it's positioned at a gateway between two continents, Europe and Asia, and it also connects, by water, the Black Sea and the Mediterranean via the Sea of Marmara. From a trade perspective, it's a prime spot. It's also strategic because it was really only vulnerable to attack from the west. So, Byzantium had many advantages over other places. It also gave Constantine easier access to the frontiers. Under Constantine, it's no understatement to say that Byzantium, as a city, was transformed. It expanded. It was equipped with new walls, but the city's urban development from this point onwards isn't like that of other provincial Roman cities, because it wasn't just any other city anymore. It was now the capital of the Roman Empire, and it had to look like it. So we see, for example, statuary being brought from other parts of the empire to furnish this new capital. The Hippodrome was just one of the recipients of this decoration program. Some of the monuments were placed there by Constantine, others were placed by later emperors. We can see some of these statues in old maps and drawings of the Hippodrome, and they're documented in some literary sources. But only vestiges of the monuments themselves survive today. Most were destroyed in 1204, when the city was sacked during the Fourth Crusade. We know that there used to be victory monuments and statues of gods, goddesses, and heroes, mythical creatures, animals, important rulers like Augustus, Diocletian, probably Julius Caesar, and even Alexander the Great, as well as a statue of the wolf with Romulus and Remus from Rome's origin story. This latter statue was likely included because Constantine aspired for Constantinople to become Rome's successor. But scholars have recognized a range of other purposes for these different themes seen in the Hippodrome statuary. Some statues have been identified as apotropeia, having had protective powers. Others were associated with victories, and others with parts of Rome's glorious past, showing people that Constantine was ushering in a new golden age. This selection of statues wasn't arbitrary, it was carefully curated with purpose. The bathhouse initiated by Septimius Severus, known as the Baths of Zeuxippos, was also revamped by Constantine and furnished with such statuary. Bathhouses were important places in Roman cities because they were one of the main places where Romans socialized. This sounds very odd to us today. Bathing is a very private thing, but that's what the Romans did, and it played a big role in their Roman identity. Anyways, monumental architecture and public buildings in the Roman Empire's provincial cities were often built by local elites. Through building projects, they could show off their status and promote themselves as generous benefactors. And as patrons, these elites could have statues of themselves placed within the bathhouses, alongside statues of people and figures who were important to that city. This would have worked in Byzantium when it was just Byzantium, but it wouldn't cut it for Constantine's new capital. He couldn't have the old elites being the stars of the show. He's the new star, and he's the one doing the city's makeover, so he revamps the bathhouse and he equips it with what he deems a more appropriate set of statues. Statues of famous figures from Greco-Roman history and mythology. Deities and heroes, as well as famous philosophers, poets, historians, military figures, and statesmen could all be found in the baths of Zeuxippos. These themes are more in tune with what we find at other imperial bathhouses and those in larger Roman centers. Also, Zeuxippos is the new capital's main bathhouse. It has to resonate with the wider Roman population. Famous figures from Greco-Roman history and mythology would have been more recognizable to people from around the empire than the local pre-Constantinian elites of Byzantium. These statues were not merely decoration. Through them, Constantine was carving Constantinople's new civic identity. It is only natural that the baths of the new capital, as it was now serving the entire Roman Empire, would be equipped with statuary that would have been relatable to the wider Roman world. And in a way, the new repertoire didn't entirely ignore Byzantium's pre-Constantinian history, because many of the statues were of Greek figures. In fact, one of the most prominent myths depicted in the statuary of the bathhouse was that of the Trojan epic. This importation of statuary was a true statement of power because Constantine, as the emperor, was the only one who could order a monument to be moved from one city to another. But there was more to this decision. It was normal for cities to put up statues that reflected the respective city's history, but Byzantium's history could not compete with Rome's. So, through equipping it with statues that would have been considered already ancient in the 4th century AD, and statues that carried grand connotations, Byzantium's position was elevated. Constantine wasn't just furnishing his city and making it beautiful and imperial, he was creating a new identity for it, one rooted in the mythical and historical figures of Rome and the region, and at the same time legitimizing Byzantium's place as a new imperial capital. The importation of ancient statuary into Constantinople continued until the 6th century. One of the examples that you can see is an obelisk that was brought from Egypt by the Emperor Theodosius I. He attached a base with carvings depicting himself as a triumphant emperor to it. This was placed in the Hippodrome in the year 390. You can see it in Istanbul, it's still standing to this day. There was also an increase in church building, since Christianity was tolerated and even favored by Constantine. He actually founded the church that is now Hagia Sophia, and likely what is now Hagia Irene, although the extant buildings are the works of later emperors. He's also credited with starting construction on the Church of the Holy Apostles, where he was buried. This site was intended to be both a royal mausoleum and a place to house holy relics. We are told that the relics of Saints Andrew, Timothy, and Luke were showcased there. It was Constantine's plan to gather the relics of all 12 apostles and house them in that church, but this was never achieved, and the latter two saints whose relics were brought there weren't even one of the original 12 apostles. And of course, we can't forget Constantine's Great Palace. This was set up next to the Hippodrome and was extended by later emperors. The Great Palace remained the main imperial residence until the 11th century, when emperors began to favor the Palace of Blachernae. The Great Palace sadly fell into disrepair, and the Ottomans found it in an already abandoned state when they conquered the city in 1453. Another crucial addition to the refounded city was the Forum of Constantine, located at the gate of the city's former Severan walls. Fora were very important public places in ancient Roman cities. They're where all the main day-to-day activities took place. Think of them as functioning like a town square. These were typically rectangular, but Constantine's forum was circular, and at its center was a large porphyry column with a bronze statue on its top of the emperor wearing a radiate crown. It is thought that this associates the emperor with the sun god Helios, who is a personification of the sun, although the exact connotation of this statue is debated. There was also a senate house located here, although nothing of that building survives archaeologically. We also know that the forum was adorned with more imported statues, a big theme in Constantine's revamp of Byzantium. Here you can see a reconstruction of the Constantinian forum, but note that it is a hypothetical reconstruction. The spatial relationship between the statues here in this forum and the exact placement of most is guesswork, however we do know that they existed. The porphyry column is still standing, but not the statue on its top. That fell during the Middle Ages. I can imagine how exciting it must have been to be living in Byzantium at the time of Constantine. One day, you're living in what is just another provincial town in the Roman Empire, and the next day you wake up and the emperor has decided that your city will be his new Rome. And in a matter of just a few years, suddenly you've got an embellished bathhouse, a palace, a senate, a humongous hippodrome, and tons of statues imported from all over the empire. And to top it all off, you've now got churches housing holy relics. It must have been a really exciting time to be alive, to witness all those urban developments and changes. And the revamp didn't stop there. The city expanded further. It acquired more fora, many more statues and monuments, several more churches, monasteries, and it got new walls. Walls that nobody could penetrate for 1,000 years. Here on this map, you can see some important elements of the ancient city added by subsequent emperors and elites. For example, we've got more fora along the main road, we've got new churches and monasteries, we have the aqueduct of Valens and cisterns to beef up the water supply system, and new harbors. And the city continues to evolve to this day under the name of Istanbul. The shift from Byzantium to Constantinople wasn't just one of official name, it was accompanied by a change in urban identity. Changes that reflected the city's newfound status as the Nova Roma. It was no longer Byzantium, a minor city at the edge of the European ground of the Roman Empire. It was now Constantinople, the empire's capital and premier city, and Constantine's construction projects duly reflected this. Let me know what else you'd like to know about the city in the comments. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more cool content by your go-to informant on everything archaeology, Madam Archaeologist.